welcome to the roundtable. Today we are taking a look at the rising number of suicides amongst the young. Students are committing suicide, whether it is due to pressure, whether it is work pressure, whether it is academics, or just peer pressure, social media pressure, bullying, harassment. The numbers are just astounding. The reasons behind it are equally astounding. Also, these are young lives that are being taken by themselves. They are committing suicide. So this is something we're going to be discussing on the show today, the reasons for this. In fact, I have the NCRB, the National Crime Records Bureau data with me, which says as many as 14,000 students, 13,900 committed suicide in 2023, and the numbers are just rising. In fact, recently we had the case of a student in in one of the Delhi schools, Delhi's Columba, St. Columba School, who committed suicide. He jumped off a metro. He, of course, a metro station, he jumped. He claims that he was harassed by the teachers. This is what led him to commit suicide. His parents are also alleging harassment by the teachers. The boy was not perhaps so good in academics. He wanted to take up dancing and he was being bullied by the teacher. Some even say that one of the teachers pushed him. So this is just one of the cases. In fact, 2 days ago, we also had a class 10 student girl in Telangana who jumped off the fifth floor of a building because her parents admonished her for her poor marks. There are reasons. We've heard of stories where there's been peer pressure, bullying. I will, of course, open up this show to my panelists to try and find out why is this happening, what can be done, and of course, what is troubling our young students today. Joining me on the show is Monisha Bhaskar. She's a former principal at Play School and a theatre activist. I have Anjali Mandal. She taught at DPS RK Puram, Vasant Vihar for 18 years. She's also authored a children's book. And currently, she is conducting teacher level training courses for class nursery to class 2. I have with me Ambika Singh. She's a child and adolescent psychotherapist at Family Tree. And Arshita Kapoor. She's a career counselor at the Jayashree Perival International School. Arshita, you are also dealing a lot with the pressures. I'm not even going into the academic pressures, the admissions. Let's go into that later. But just the psychology and what troubles our teens today. These are young. Some of them are not even teens.
So I actually conducted a research about 2 years back, and I was looking at how kids feel post and during the application process, because usually I work with kids from class 11 and 12. And it was really shocking to see that most of our kids feel so guilty during the process because they don't know how to divide their time between, the academics, their social pressures of looking a certain way, being a certain place, being at a certain place.
Correct.
And of course, doing the application as well. So all of that actually puts them down at a place where they feel very guilty at the end of the process and not happy, not content, and not satisfied. And that is something that was really shocking. And that is something that we can see from all of these outcomes that we talk about as well from. So it's actually not just one thing. It's not just the academic pressure, but having to look a certain way, be at certain places, and get into certain colleges. All of that boils down to, of course, them having to take such drastic steps. There's ways to stop it, and I do believe we can do a lot more. We're not doing enough. But I don't think there's one person to be blamed. But as a society, we need to do something for our children.
Yeah, we'll go into what institutional reforms. In fact, we had a conversation earlier also. I see Ambika and I think Monisha and yourself after that series Adolescent, where we talked about screen time and the outside influences. But Monisha, a lot of it too, the pressures, are the parents to blame only, or is it just the pressures in the child's mind also, because now they're having access to so many other influences than just what is happening in the home and the school.
There are it's a joint pressure that comes, Priya. Parents have very unrealistic demands from children. Some parents, they want to live their life or their unfulfilled dreams through the child. They want the child to do a thing where the child neither possesses a desire or the skill set to follow that line. They don't let the child, or they don't, whether the child speaks up or not is a second matter. But there is this constant pressure from a very young age, even in nursery. They used to come and they used to talk about, after coming to your nursery school, will our child get into IIT? Will you teach not just these little slides? Can you teach them a little of cricket or horse riding? And I was like, it's a 3.5, 4-year-old child. How will he sit on a horse? How will he play cricket? So it starts from there. That, we want our child to be an achiever. And I used to tell her and counsel a lot of parents to say that, listen, somebody who's happy being what you call a mediocre student or a mediocre person who enjoys sports for just playing the sport can also be a
Yeah.
way of life. Every child is not Sachin Tendulkar. Every child is not going to open a Reliance industry. So understand your child and put your pressure. Don't let it become pressure. Keep it encouragement. You discuss, you debate, you nudge a child gently towards what the child can do. Social media, I feel, on the other hand, is an absolute devil as far as that age of social media is concerned. When you're older, you can understand what is not real, what is just being said for effect, what is, because more than 80% of social media is a lie. People project
Hmm.
they're very happy, people project they're very well to do, they're very learned, not realizing that a lot of times you can see through that. However, when you're young, when your children in your teens or even younger, it is a thing that makes you very, very lonely. I believe growing up in a joint family, we had a lot of people we could talk to. If you were upset, you had a cousin around or a chachi who gave you, a chocolate to eat, or there was a masi who said something. Whereas now these children are so much into just their phones or their laptops, they don't have that concept to naturally speak to somebody, to say that I'm feeling down, to wake up in the morning and say, no, today is not a bright sunshine day. I'm feeling a little down. Can I talk to a sibling? Can I talk to a very good friend? That doesn't exist because there's so much,
Okay.
everything is utho game khelo, utho score banao. So it
Hmm.
becomes very counterproductive when the child is low on confidence. They don't know how to deal with
Fair.
it.
Yeah, I'm becoming actually this is the point, the impact of, instead of playtime there is phone time. So all a also breakdown of the joint family system, breakdown of just conversation also, which is happening. People
Correct.
are just talking on screen rather than to going to meet their friend. Now instead of going in the park to play, they'll just put their phones on. It's so much easier.
Even
You
even
don't even look
something
for.
as simple as wishing happy birthday, instead of calling on the phone, they send messages
Yeah.
which is HBD. You don't even type happy birthday, and the response is TY, thank you. You're like,
Okay, if at all. At least thank you, the bol rahe hain. It is the teacher who harassed him. The parents were actually being supportive. They said, we will change your school, just give us 10 days more because you have your exam. But he couldn't take that 10 days. So that's, is the confidence, the resilient spirit of our children also. Are we over coddling them, mollycoddling them? Why? Are they not also, there are pressures. Teachers, not every teacher is nice, of course, the harassment has gone a bit too far in this case. So is there something in the way, the upbringing of the child also? Are we too overprotective also of them?
I would like to say something because having taught in a mainstream school in Delhi for about 18 years, and now I'm doing
Correct.
foundational level, we are training the teachers who are teaching foundation, like, nursery to class two. So I think one major point is also like, when teachers are hired for the job. See, initially, when we were all growing up and we were going to college in the 80s and early 90s, everybody got in, like me being from Delhi, we all got into Delhi University. There was no question that you wouldn't get in. So if you got good marks, better marks, according to that, you went into a what was at that time a better college, but everybody got in. But now the pressures on the children are, huge. Plus, they are teenagers. And I think sometimes the, teaching is unfortunately treated like a very, it's not really given that much respect in today's day and age. I mean, if you look at the youngsters now, say in their 20s and 30s, I've got two grown up children. I don't know of anybody in their generation who wants to become a teacher, right? So a lot of the times, the teachers who are going into the profession are going in for this profession because, say, in a sample size of 10, maybe two are
Hmm.
really wanting to become teachers, but the other eight are doing it because either they're going to do a master's in something else, it's just like a stopgap arrangement, or then the families are not allowing them to work because it's still considered to be a sort of a conventional job. And on the other hand, there is a lot of pressure on teachers as well because of the board exams. It's a result oriented thing. So I think there has definitely been, I started teaching in 2000, and I think there has definitely been a decline in the quality of teachers. Also, I feel personally that headmistresses, headmasters, principals, they are put in that position on a basis of seniority in a lot of schools. I think there
Hmm.
should be more stringent measures, where there is some kind of a psychological test that they also undergo, because the way they deal with their teachers and the way they deal with their students, it's very important. Teaching is a job, is a profession which is not taken very seriously in this country. Unfortunately, I mean, I have myself been out on, say, social occasions when I was teaching full time, and I would be asked, what do you do? I'm teaching. Where you teaching? XYZ. And which classes are you teaching? I'm teaching the kindergarten classes. Okay, fine. It was, oh, she's just a teacher. So, that is a mindset which needs to be changed. Maybe the salaries need to be increased, but the teachers now have many more degrees. But I feel if you don't like children, don't become a teacher. Because, like very young children, they require, like I have taught very small children who are now, I think my first batch is maybe 30 years old. So, you are like their second mother. They come and talk to you. You have to talk to them. We do training sessions now with teachers where we have a full segment, my colleague and I, where we call Know Your Student. So, whether you're a small in a kindergarten class and especially in the older classes, you must know what's going on with your children. Talk to them, not don't talk at them. And you must have some sympathy, like in this particular case of the child being
Yeah.
pushed. And also, one more point I would like to add is that a lot of teachers also have a lot of biases. So if this boy is wanting to become a dancer, right? अरे तुम लड़के हो, तुम क्या dancing करोगे? This is something which needs to change. As
Yeah, she
teachers,
didn't even say that. She says you don't dance well. That's for one of the news reports.
yeah, I mean,
So she even pushed him. He fell down, or she said you don't dance well. So you don't
the
also mock
teachers'
the.
personal biases, their religious ideologies, and all, they should be left in the house when they enter the school.
Fair
That's
enough.
something
Okay,
I feel
before
very strongly about also.
okay, Ambika, we kind of lost your audio, so I just want you to recap what you said about the child. How because there is a lack of available resource from the adult world, the child turns to the online world. So just recap a bit of what you said.
I was saying that when a suicide happens, we try to look at what is the causality, or we try to look at what was lacking in the young person. But my point was that when adults in the system aren't available to engage with, young people will turn to things like social media and the internet, where the quality of engagement they get is of a different kind. So if I can't speak to adults in the house because they're dismissive or they're not taking seriously what feels important to me, it's easier to talk to a chatbot, which will be more empathetic and responsive. And it needs to be looked at in a systemic way as to what's happening in the engagement with children and young people and adults if adults are not willingly available or present to be responsive to them. So my primary point was that our responsiveness as adults will determine how much children and young people engage with us. And that's what needs to be really looked at.
Fair enough. It's not, I mean, if you're looking at the issue, we have to look at the whole, entire universe that is being engaged. Good point. I'm going to take a quick break and come back and keep the conversation going. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Roundtable. We are here discussing the rising cases of suicides among school children, young kids, some of them not even teenagers, are taking their own lives. What are the pressures? What are the compulsions? That's what we're discussing today. Arshita, of course, you are dealing a lot with the academic side, but there is also an emotional trauma which you hinted at earlier also. Because of the pressures, the kids feel more pressurized into what is the way out, and parents play their own role. But emotionally, our kids, do they talk to you about what they're going through, because they all need someone to talk to rather than their parents, so what are the anxieties?
So a lot of times I actually do a lot of my counseling sessions without the parents, because of course we do our first counseling session where the parents are involved, and we kind of get an understanding of the family, and then thereon we do all of our sessions just with the student. And slowly, because we work with them for about 2 years, the kids really open up and talk about a lot that goes on at home and of course at school as well. So in fact, I'm privy to a lot of the information that a lot of teachers, sometimes parents, and even, their counselors at school are not privy to. And that's simply because they feel that I'm a person who can help them get out of a problem because I'm sending them to university. So it's a good way out of, a lot of the issues that they're dealing with. So like I had hinted at earlier as well, that, having to deal with bullying at school, or having to deal with the social pressures of maintaining that my dad went to an Ivy League, so I need to go to an Ivy League, or need to go to a college that they're happy talking about. And, of course, again, we've spoken about this earlier. There's a lot of cocktail talk in our metropolitan cities where parents are going out and talking about what uni did your child get into, or they're applying for this course, or it's not as good as this course. So there's a lot of pressure based on all of these things that parents want to kind of boast about their children, not understanding that each child is different and unique, and there is something called a best fit when we look at universities. I could be really, really smart, but I could not be a great fit at Yale. And that is something that you need to understand, that not all bright minds go to, let's say, IIT or AIMS or even the Yale and the Stanford of the world, because you have to realize that not everyone is made or cut out for that. That understanding is really lacking in our society, because for us it means that if you have 100%, that means you need to go to SRCC. There's no way out. अच्छा, economics क्यों नहीं पढ़ सकते? Economics ही पढ़ो या यही पढ़ो. Why are you studying dance? Why are you studying music? They're not like lucrative careers. They're not going to make you any money. But you have to understand the child has to do something for the rest of their lives. So it is something that we need to focus on as well. So in my conversations, I make sure that I'm actually listening to what the student really wants to study and do, and not what their families are pushing them to. Because it's so often that I start off with a conversation where parents are saying, I know she's great, she's creative, and she wants to do design, but it's not going to make her money. So let's get her into economics and business first, and then she can do what she wants to do. So those kind of conversations then have to move on to kind of more counseling for the parents and then lesser for the child, so that they are all on the same page. So it's actually the whole society that needs to be trained here, not just not just a child, or not just the parents there.
Fair enough. But Monisha, what are the trauma, the anxieties of the child? You've also interacted with the kids apart from the parents. So, or are they too young? At that age, also compare them to our childhood. What are the anxieties that they are facing?
The anxieties that they're facing is one, that they are unable to express themselves at home, or parents don't have the time. Most families now are in that race to have a good lifestyle, so both the parents are working. Children are usually with servants, one servant or another, servant. Sorry. There are no grandparents around because the joint family system is not there. There is nobody else to, talk to them and give them that warmth. Secondly, I feel there is, when they're that young, they don't have peer pressure. But as they turn into teenagers and as they grow up, there is a lot of peer pressure about the way you look, about the way, about what are you wearing. I mean, there are young girls or young boys, and, when one goes to parties, there's opening sentences, hi, looking nice, who are you wearing? Who you wearing means what? Which designer are you wearing? When we were younger, none of this mattered. What mattered was that when you go out for a party or when you go out to see a play, whatever you're doing, you enjoy the moment, you enjoy being with friends, you enjoy what you eat and drink and come back. Not who you're wearing, how you're wearing, which event are you seen at, where are you going. So these kind of pressures, which are not addressed by the parents at home, parents probably are leading that life themselves or they don't have the time. So these kind of pressures come in. Then the next thing is, like you say, with education. Everything is about education. You have to come first. You have to be the best runner. You have to be the prettiest one on stage. All these kind of pressures are very, very unrealistic. And parents somehow don't back off. Teachers are a little, as Anjali said, teachers are not empathetic towards children. A lot of them, they're very strict. So the child has nowhere to go. Plus, parents are, the mode of parent-child has changed. Now the parents are talking to the child, seeking approval. Can we come into your room? Would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? We were told, get ready. We are going for 2 months to Nani's house to play games, whatever. None of this, this should we do it, should we not do it? So as a result, very young children are coming into the decision-making stage. That, how can a 14-year-old decide where they want to go for a holiday? How can the 14-year-old decide which restaurant? You can say what cuisine do you like. How can that child be given the thing that, he only wants to eat Chinese at the Taj? So this kind of silly encouragement, which later on becomes a problem because the child is not used to hearing a no. When you come into the real world, you have a boss who's going to, tell you, listen, pull up your socks or get out. There's going to be somebody around who's going to drive a car fancier than yours or be prettier. So they don't prepare this child for that. As a result, it's a rude shock in their teenage years that there is somebody who could do things better than me, or I have to wait for a turn. That multiplied with the fact that they have nobody to talk to. I'm sure counselors in schools and all are doing their job, but like this boy, the unfortunate incident that recently happened, he said that before he did what he did, he had spoken to the teacher for 45 minutes, trying to reason, and the teacher just dismissed it off as a joke. The counselor counselor said that he had spoken about his suicide thoughts, but the counselor just said he
Tendencies.
dismissed it off as a joke. So, you know, where is reality? Where is a joke? Because I'm told by a lot of doctors and psychiatrists that when they're planning to commit suicide, there is always that one moment, you know, where they're ready to do the madness. If you're able to pull them out of that, they come back to their senses. Unfortunately, these
Okay.
children are not getting that moment with anybody. They are searching,
So
they're
that's,
looking for
yeah.
that moment, someone to save
But
them.
more than that, also, Ambika, the point that Monisha made about are we overprotecting, mollycoddling the kids? That's, we're not teaching them to hear no. We're not, parents are also in that sense, and also this whole thing, kids treating kids as equal, the voices. They're kids, so they should be told rather than, be a participatory decision maker and everything.
I don't think it can be all or none. Like in a young person, like at 13, 14, you're also learning how to become an adult eventually. So a lot of parents either get into telling them what to do or asking them to be the sole decision makers. It can't be either
Right.
this or that. So because of the way the development of the human brain takes place, the child or the young person also needs to be taught how to make decisions in this phase. So it's if you only tell them what to do, you're not teaching them how to make choices. Then you'll have adults that don't know how to make choices and are super compliant. If you make them only make choices, then they not know how to say no. Then you won't know how to say no to them. So there has to be a balance between how you invite the young person to think through decision making. So there can be a collaborative approach where it isn't all or none. But in any system, the parent is the parent. The parent is the primary adult. So responsibility of decision making, what needs to be done, or a larger picture needs to be with the adult in the system. The young person can't and should not decide. And yet at the same time, you're also teaching them the skill of how to make choices. So I think it's a
Right.
delicate balance. It can't be either this or that.
And what about the part about parents being overprotective of the kids
I don't know if I fully
and their
agree.
sensibilities
I
emotionally
don't know.
overprotective?
Well, honestly, I think children need protection. I do think that there is a protectiveness that should be granted to someone who's younger than you, but we need to differentiate between being protective and being subservient, because that's not the same thing. I can be protective of a young person and still have a firm authority on what I think is right or wrong. So there has to be a difference between being submissive or permissive and being protective. Because children need protection, young people need protection. We have adults and circles of care because they are younger and still in a developmental model becoming an adult. So I do think
Hmm.
protectiveness is important, but we need to differentiate between being protective and just being like, yeah, do what we want, or we can't say anything to them. There needs to be more clarity on what we mean by when we say overprotective. Kids need protection. Yes, we should be protective.
Yeah, but if a kid, again, it's a very thin line. Anjali, for instance, today, if a kid has, schools have a way of marking. When we were failed, we got that red paper with red marks scratched all over. Now, I don't even think some schools don't even say fail. They'll say, some polite word of saying you're not as good as the others. Everybody is given a star once a week, in the class. So there are ways of keeping the kids' confidence up. But then, are we preparing them for the real world? That point that Monisha made is also there.
I think, what the focus now these days is, you're right in what you said, because like I remember when I was teaching, so like remedial classes, somebody pointed out, a parent, that this sounds very negative. So a child who was being sent for some remedial classes, like some extra classes in a particular subject, though that title was changed to extra reinforcement for better development. It was like a long sentence. I don't know what it was, but it was changed. But yes, I think, the focus is always on being the best, getting an A plus, being number one. Nobody really teaches these children, and this should come from the house also, that it's okay if you don't, despite trying really hard, you don't succeed, because that happens to everybody, right? You try and then you could fail, you could fall flat on your
Hmm.
face. So the focus is very much to succeed. The focus is, everything should always be hunky dory. But actually, as you grow older, everything is sometimes not always hunky dory. So, we don't prepare our children. It's, like mentally strong. What is that? I mean, what does it mean? It comes from the house, it comes from the school also. You have to prepare your children to be mentally stronger, to be able to withstand. And having said that, there are a lot of children who are able to cope with many situations, and there are some children who are not able to cope with some
Hmm.
situations. So we cannot have a blanket use for that. But I think that we've discussed a lot about what happens in the house, but I think in the schools also, the teachers should definitely be a little bit more invested in the children. They should talk to them. I think it all boils down to communication, whether it's at home or whether it's in the school, because very often children come up to a teacher, "Acho, bhago yahan se. Go, I'm very busy. Go, I'll listen to you later." So you see, communication is the key. Even at home, parents, how many parents actually sit down and talk to their children? How many parents actually sit down and talk? They just kind of dismiss them. Either they are busy. And it's like when you say you're trying to discipline a child when they're growing up. If it's like, for instance, you're telling your child, get up in the morning and have a bath and have breakfast on time. If they see the mother and the father doing the same, they will lead. I mean, they will, by example, they will learn. You can't just tell them
Correct.
you have to be a certain way and the parents are doing something completely different. So it is
Good point. Yeah.
things have changed, and the balance, I think, there's a lot of imbalance now. And I think parents
Yeah,
and teachers are sort of fumbling around, but I think also a lot of it basically simply boils down to communication between the child and the parent, between the child and the teachers,
And yeah, but I think we're out of time. But the horror of it, for what prompts a child to take such a final step is something. Yes, we need institutional safeguards. We talked about this earlier. We need more communication between parents, children, everybody. But still, such a drastic step, and to feel that it is okay to take it, there has to be the outside influences. What goes on in a child's mind is really, really scary, and something we really need to focus on. And I'm sure we'll have more shows discussing this. But for now, thank you all for joining us on this topic. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.